In this lecture, we would like to discuss another important international maritime trade canal, and that is Suez Canal. So, Suez Canal exactly can be thought of as a man-made river canal that connects the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. The Suez Canal stretches from the Red Sea, that is the Gulf of Suez, to Mediterranean Sea, and traveling through many natural lakes on its way, as Red Sea to south and the Mediterranean Sea to the north of the waterway, and that is known as Suez Canal. And it is about 120 miles long, using many natural lakes along its length. Its completion was made in 1869, which was begun in 1859, and has led to the increase in population and settlements within the region of the Suez Canal. And as Suez Canal and an artificial waterway in Egypt that connects the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. So, like the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal helps ships avoid having to travel around the southern tip of Africa as they move between Europe and Asia. By cutting across the Isthmus of Suez, the Suez Canal technically separates Africa and Asia into two distinct land masses. So, now we would like to discuss the history of Suez Canal. The Suez Canal took 10 years to complete, starting in 1859 and finishing in 1869. While the Suez Canal creates a waterway connecting the Red and Mediterranean seas through connecting existing natural lakes, it is not the first canal used for the transport of goods through the area, as history shows that the ancient Egyptian people, the Ptolemaic people, and the Roman Empire also dug canals in the region for the same general purpose. However, these earlier canals stretch across the entire isthmus of Suez to connect the two main seas. The Suez Canal was the first to create a fully traversable waterway from sea to sea. And now we will touch the very history, as the earliest documented attempts to create a canal in the Suez region were seen in the time of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs. These pharaohs had the idea of connecting the Nile River and the two main seas, Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, together through a system of canals. Many successive pharaohs completed and abandoned parts of the project through the time, which we could trace to 1310 before Christ to up to 640 AD. It was not until 1700 AD that the first modern canals were attempted by Napoleon Bonaparte's expedition team. Napoleon sought French control of a waterway, increasing world trade because this would disadvantage Great Britain and favor France. Napoleon's desires were not brought to His desire, due to a mathematical miscalculation that seems to show the canal would not be feasible. The engineers believed that the heights of the two seas were drastically different, so much so that it would not be possible to connect them. However, Napoleon's modern desire for the shortcut waterway planted the very seed for its final creation, and in particular in the year 1854, the project was approved by Syed Pasha, the Ottoman viceroy of Egypt. So, the very founder and who built the Suez Canal, we could trace the name of Ferdinand De Lessepse. So Ferdinand De Lessepse is recognized as the builder of Suez Canal because he was the Frenchman to whom the Ottoman viceroy gave permission to build the canal. The company that De Lessepse formed, the Suez Canal Company, jointly owned by French and Egyptian entities, designed and built the Suez Canal. Its initial board of directors held representatives from 14 different countries. Starting in 1859, the 10-year construction period of the canal is attributed to difficulties such as cholera, epidemic, financial struggles, and the mechanics of digging the canal by hand. The canal officially opened on November 17, 1869, although it had been completed in August of that year. So, now we would like to particularly discuss the operation or the ownership of Suez Canal. So, Canal Company was having joint ownership by French and Egypt entities. The ownership of the Suez Canal today is reverted to Egypt in 1962, when Egypt made the final payment of the original holders of the Canal Authority. Today, Egyptians own Suez Canal with the Suez Canal Authority, which controls the canal. So, in that particularly, we would like to discuss the very ownership of the Suez Canal Authority and its very construction. The Suez Canal is operated entirely by the Egyptians. It has only been completely closed twice in its history. Once it was closed in 1956 during a British, French, and Israel invasion of Egypt. The canal was reopened in 1957. The second time it was closed as a result of the Arab-Israel War of June 1967. And that particular war led to the canal was not reopened until June 1975. So now we would like to discuss about the establishment and organization of the Suez Canal Authority. The Suez Canal Authority is an independent authority having legal personality, and it was established by the Nationalization Act of 1956 by the then late Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. The act at the same time nationalized the Suez Canal Company and transferred all its assets and employees to the Suez Canal Authority, which was established by the 1956 Suez Canal Authority Act. The very act rests some responsibilities, and those responsibilities that we would like to discuss, such as the very responsibility of the Suez Canal Authority is for operation and maintenance of the Suez Canal for the safety of the traffic and for all other matters relating thereto. And it was according to the nationalization that Suez Canal Authority is bound by the 1988 Convention of Constantinople, which grants the right of free access and use of the canal at equal condition to all ships, commercial ships and ships of war in times of peace or of war, even to ships of belligerent parties. The Suez Canal Authority is responsible for the computerized traffic management supported by radar for the 14th pilot stations and their pilots. Since 1996, Suez Canal Authority operates the Maritime Training and Simulation Center for its pilots. So, Suez Canal Authority operates some 60 ships and boats, such as docks, grazers, cranes, and smaller boats. According to Suez Canal Authority's website, its facilities also include 114 ferry connections with 36 ferry boats and the Ahmad Hamdi Road Tunnel, the Nile Shipyard, the roads alongside the canal, a silk production in a format Serabium, using treated sanitary waste water for irrigation, water plants in the canal sites, 12,000 housing units, a hospital in Ismailia and emergency hospitals at both ends of the canal and 4 schools and various sports and recreational centers. So now we would like to discuss about the assets and revenues of Suez Canal authorities. So, in particularly in the year 2008, the Suez Canal authorities were having the revenues and all areas, buildings and equipment pertaining thereto. The Suez Canal Authority issues rules of navigation, specifies the tolls for the use of the canal and collects them. The tolls are collected in USA dollar, Great Britain pound, and the European euro and other currencies. So, in particular, in 2008, it collected the revenues around 5,382 million US dollar for the passage of a total 21,415 vessels. So, in particular in the year 2020, the revenue collection generated amount to 5.60 51 billion US dollar and 18,829 ships with a total net tonnage of 1.17 billion passed through the canal. And in particularly in the year 2021, the Suez Canal authorities collected the highest ever revenue in the history of the canal, around 6.3 billion USA dollars. And in particular in 2022, the annual revenue stood at 8 billion USA dollar. As transit fees, and in particular in the year 2023, the Suez Canal set a new record with annual revenue up to 9.8 billion USA dollar. So, in particularly, the very importance of Suez Canal, as we found from the formation of the Suez Canal Authority after its nationalization, why the Suez Canal Authority Act in 1956, and ultimately the Suez Canal was converted and reverted to Egypt in 1962 when Egypt made the final payment of the original to holders of the Canal Authority. So today the Egyptians own Suez Canal with the Suez Canal Authority which controls the canal. So the trade through the Suez Canal has always been strong. And if you will go back to its earlier history, in its first year, the canal saw almost 500 ships transit through its waterways, but by 1966, 100 years later, that number was up to 21,250 ships annually, which is about 58 per day, representing almost 278 million metric tons of cargo. Trade through the canal dropped to zero in 1967 and eventually resumed at a slower but still impressive 50 ships per day since its reopening in 1975. And as it was due to the very war in between the two countries, that is of Egypt and Israel, and as at present we found, in spite of the continuing war in the Middle East in between Israel and Hamas and the involvement of United States of America and Iran and the Houthi tribes, the canal is continuing to thrive and its present position is as much growing as it was close twice in its history. But even at present, the Suez Canal is continuing the international maritime trade, and in relation to those trade in between the Red Sea, Gulf of Suez to Mediterranean Sea, which is a 120 miles long waterway connecting in between these two seas. Although it was closed once in 1956 during a British French and Israel invasion of Egypt, the canal was reopened in 1957 and the second time it was closed during the Arab-Israel War of June 1967. And finally, the canal was opened in 1975 and at present the Suez Canal is continually doing thriving business and since 2008 to 2023, the revenue collection of the Suez Canal Authority from million US dollar to billions of US dollar indicates its thriving, growing business and international trade through the waterway as it was the man-made waterway of the world and it took the construction almost for 10 years from 1859 to 1869. Even though the very history we found that it showed that the Egyptian pharaohs in the ancient time they attempted and abandoned many source ports. And finally, how Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to diminish the very importance of the Britishers by accessing the facilities of building a canal through Red Sea to Mediterranean Sea. And finally, the Ottoman viceroy of Egypt, who appointed the Frenchman Ferdinand De Lessepse, which is recognized as the builder of the Suez Canal. And initially, it was under the control of Suez Canal Company, which was having joint ownership by the French and Egyptian entities. And finally, in 1956, through an act of nationalization, Suez Canal Authority was created and the final ownership of the Suez Canal was reverted to Egypt in 1962. And also we have discussed regarding those responsibilities of the Suez Canal Authority as per the Nationalization Act of Suez Canal Authority and its obligations under the 1888 Convention of Constantinople and the very establishment of the Maritime Training and Simulation Center by the Suez Canal Authority. And finally, we have also discussed the assets and revenues of the Suez Canal Authority and also the present position and its very importance and the trading activities through the Suez Canal and as at present as it is controlled by the Suez Canal Authority. So almost we have discussed the very importance of Suez Canal Authority and its location history and the beginning of Suez Canal Company and ultimately the establishment of Suez Canal Authority by the Nationalization Act of 1956 by the then late President of Egypt,